So recently I've been thinking about the future of Miraculous Ladybug, and more specifically, what's going to happen once Hawkmoth and Mayura are out of the picture. Now we know from Time Tagger that in the future there's a new Hawkmoth who akumatizes people in the future for their own agenda. A while ago I made a video speculating on the identity of that future Hawkmoth, but regardless of who it is, it creates a big gap in the story for fresh villains to fill. Gabriel and Natalie won't be around forever, so as minor villains like Lila, Felix, or maybe even Chloe step up to fill that big void, new characters need to be chosen to fill the minor villain role. Now obviously, since that would take place in the future, a new character could easily be introduced to fill that role, but I think we've already been introduced to the perfect candidate, and they're already being groomed to take on that position and become a villain. And obviously, if you've read the title of the video, you know I mean Chris. Now I realise that theory's a little bit out there. After all, he's just a kid, right? But I think we're having the seeds planted early to give him a gradual villain origin story as the story progresses. Now, I'll just go out and say that I think the future Hawkmoth is Lila. I think it just makes the most sense and fits the arc that she's currently going through in the show really well. Just like Hawkmoth is currently mentoring Lila as a villain and using her in a number of schemes, I think that role will be filled by Chris for Lila's tenure as Hawkmoth. At the end of Time Tagger, we saw that Lila had been trusted to babysit Chris for Nino's family, and she was busy wrapping him around her little finger. Now we know that Lila is a very skilled liar and manipulator. A lot of her episodes revolve around turning people against each other or making herself seem more impressive in comparison to the rest of her class. She easily pulls this kind of manipulation on teens and adults despite the fact that she's been proven to be a liar previously. So if she can convince them, a little kid who's left with her unsupervised has no chance of not getting hoodwinked. And I think it would be quite interesting to see whether in the coming seasons he starts to get akumatized a little more regularly because she's starting to teach him negative traits and stoking his bad behaviour, turning him against the heroes. It doesn't make much sense to me that they'd include this moment if it wasn't going to have any plot relevance going forward or if it was just a throwaway scene. But if you see it as a planting the seeds of evil moment, it fits perfectly. The next most substantial piece of evidence comes from Time Tagger, but this time from an older Chris. Time Tagger is sent to the past to get the Miraculouses from Ladybug and Cat Noir, but that's it. He doesn't seem to have any other ulterior motives other than to get the Miraculouses. Now I know it could just be for plot convenience, but I found it odd that he didn't seem to have any other motives. Like the majority of villains get derailed because they spend so much time obsessing over getting revenge on some random that ticked them off, rather than fighting the heroes, but here he was just doing future Hawkmoth's bidding. It's like when Lila would get willingly akumatized by Hawkmoth in order to fulfill her own schemes. She did it because she was bad, not because she'd been taken advantage of. And to me, it really seems like that's the case for Time Tagger. All he cares about is getting the Miraculouses, and to me it hints that he has some darker motives that are going to surface in the future. And my final piece of evidence, and admittedly probably the weakest, is that in Chris Master, he's kind of a brat. He doesn't get the toys he wants for Christmas straight away, he throws a tantrum, and then he gets akumatized. Now, that is some pretty stock standard villain behaviour, but in his defense, he is just a little kid in those episodes, and a lot of people in the show throw over the top tantrums about small things, so it doesn't really make him look too bad. Overall, I really hope that this is the direction they take with this character, slowly building him up as this kid who gets manipulated by this awful person to become a villain in his own right. It would be an interesting subversion of the superhero takes on a young kid as his sidekick trope, and it would show that Lila isn't just a second-rate Hawkmoth. It shows that she has the ability to get things done and actually be a threat, as opposed to Gabriel, who's a pretty useless villain all things considered. On top of that, it could give Nino some much needed development. Of the big 5 miraculous wielders, he definitely has the least plot relevance, and this would be a good way to boost him up, even if it's not for the current arc, but in the future. But, as always, that's just my opinion, and I'd like to hear some of your takes on this. Do you think Chris is being set up for a bigger role? Do you think they might have been planting the seeds in Time Tagger, or maybe that his scene with Lila was just a hint that she's going to be Hawkmoth going forward? If you don't agree, who are some characters you might like to see join the villains in the future? Let me know.